me, this is a real mystery. A lot of, like she said, corruption. Well, there's so much information in the books, but tonight is our opportunity to actually ask Roger Stone some questions, which is even better. So that's going to be the best part. Roger Stone, let me just tell you a little bit. He's a seasoned political operative and pundit, a veteran of 9 national presidential campaigns. A veteran of 9 national presidential campaigns. He served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents before leaving the GOP for the Libertarian Party. He's a New York Times best-selling author of the book The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, and has written many other books, these being his 2 latest. He writes for Fox, Breitbart News, StoneZone.com, The Daily Caller, and op-ed for the page of the New York Times. He lives right here in South Florida, so we are so fortunate to have him speak with us tonight. So with no further ado, Roger.
Wow, this is great. I can't wait to hear what I have to say. I want to thank you all for coming. It's turnouts like this that encourage me about the future of this country, because we are in a struggle today. What we're seeing in our national politics is the rejection of 30 years of failed decisions. And I'm very sorry to tell you there are bad decisions by both parties. Both the Republican Party, to whom I have great sentimental attachment, because I started as a Goldwater Republican. The party of small government, the party of personal freedom, the party of balanced budgets, the party of a strong national defense, and the party that was dedicated to the defeat of communism. But now, unfortunately, I'm afraid that both parties, at least elements of both parties, have become one party. The Wall Street Party, the party of special interests, the party of endless war, the party of erosion of our civil liberties, the party of massive borrowing and spending, the party of big bank bailouts, while we keep high tax rates on working people. Now, this fight goes on today within the Republican Party, and it goes on in the body politic. But if you watch the Democrats, Hillary's trying to get to the left of Bernie Sanders, and you'd have to fall off the earth to do that. Bernie says he is a democratic socialist. That's like being a meat-eating vegetarian. So I've never been involved in a campaign that is this exciting. I'm a veteran of 9 Republican national presidential campaigns. My first one for Richard Nixon, who was my political mentor, a man who was both very great and, yes, very flawed. But in retrospect, looking back at it, a man of enormous accomplishments compared to what we have today. A man who understood the international political scheme in which he skillfully turned our adversaries, the Russians and the Chinese, against each other. A man who desegregated the public schools in this country without violence. When Richard Nixon became president, 8% of the public schools in the United States were desegregated. By the time he left, that number was 93. Wow. But he gets no credit for that. He gave us our first initial environmental protection. Now, if he were alive today, yes, he would think that this has gone to excessive levels. But at the time, we had no environmental protection. And it was a time in which, yes, there are wealthy interests who will despoil our air and our water and our soil to make a profit. This is a president who saved the state of Israel single-handedly over the objection of Henry Kissinger, over the objection of his own State Department. A man who, when the state of Israel had their back against the wall because of a surprise attack by the Egyptians and the Syrians at Yom Kippur in 1973, ordered everything in the American fleet that could fly to deliver $100 million plus worth of lethal aid. Ladies and gentlemen, no Nixon, no Israel. So many Americans don't know this history. So I'm proud to call myself a Nixon Republican. And yes, I have a tattoo of Nixon on my back, about the size of a grapefruit. I kind of put it in the middle. That way I figured if I ever wanted to get a Mount Rushmore, I could get Goldwater, Reagan, and Buckley put right in there. So it's a great honor to be with you tonight and to talk about both of these books, but also to talk about the very exciting campaign that we're witnessing before our very eyes. And then I'm going to try not to talk too long so I can take more of your questions. I have a prediction on tonight's primary in Wisconsin, if anybody wants to write it down. Ted Cruz 47, Donald Trump 35, John Kasich 15. The question will be delegates. What we don't know is whether Trump will prevail in 3 or 4 congressional districts. Here's what I do know by doing a count to try to get us to 1237. Ted Cruz must win tonight. Donald Trump doesn't have to win tonight. There is a path to get to the magic number. Wisconsin was always the most competitive of the states going forward. The schedule now moves to Trump's backyard. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and I think he will prevail in all of those places. It's going to be very, very exciting. But I also must tell you, I don't think that this will be like in 1980. In 1980, at a certain point, the Republican establishment that was opposed to Ronald Reagan figured that they would throw in the towel because Reagan's nomination was inevitable and there was a good probability that he could beat Jimmy Carter. That will not happen this time. Trump will have conceivably a majority of 1,237 delegates on the first ballot on the question of presidential nominations. But it is conceivable that he will not have a working majority on procedural questions. That's because in many states, we have what we call Trojan horse delegates. Let's take Texas, for example. Due to the results of the Texas primary, Texas has 100 delegates. Donald Trump got 40% of the vote in their primary. He's entitled to 40 delegates. And he will get 40 votes from Texas on the first ballot. But the people who actually fill those seats are not Trump supporters. And they will vote against Trump on matters of rules or matters of credentials. Many of you may be too young to remember the story of the 1952 Republican Convention, but let me tell you quickly what happened. Robert Taft, the senator from Ohio, had 1,237 votes when he got to Chicago. So the Eisenhower forces challenged the credentials of the Texas and Louisiana delegates on the argument that when voters had shown up at the Texas caucuses, they didn't have a primary yet, and they were Democrats who were allowed under party rules to vote, they were turned away. Now, the Republican National Convention is not governed by federal law or state law. It's governed by its own rules as adopted. So the the Credentials Committee voted to seat the Louisiana and Texas delegates. That question went to the chair. Went to the full convention for ratification. They voted to unseat the delegates. That went to the full convention for ratification, where theoretically Taft had a majority. But the chair ruled that the Texas and Louisiana delegates could not vote on their own fate. The Eisenhower delegates were seated, Dwight Eisenhower was nominated, and he became president. This history could very well repeat itself. Let me give you an example. You could challenge the Trump delegates from South Carolina because Democrats are allowed to vote in the South Carolina primary. So you could move in credentials or rules to disallow any delegate who was elected with the votes of non-Republicans. That would, of course, then have to go, if it passed in committee, and I expect the committees to be hostile, could go to the full convention for ratification, which in turn would be an up or down vote in which Trump does not have a majority because delegations pledged to him by virtue of having won primaries and caucuses are riddled with non-supporters. So this is what I call the big steal. And it may be afoot. So we have to be vigilant. We have to insist that the votes of the people in the caucuses and the primaries matter. This isn't a matter for the bosses. This isn't a matter for the insiders. This is a matter for the people. Regardless of who you support, it's important that the votes of the voters be considered. So it's going to be the most exciting convention of my lifetime. I worked the floor at the 1976 convention for Ronald Reagan versus Gerald Ford, which was the most exciting convention I've ever been to, and I've been to every Republican National Convention since 1964. I've worked on the floor of every convention since 1972. Not always for the winner, but usually. So it is going to be exciting. If you can come to Cleveland, I urge you to do so. We are going to have massive rallies and protests and demonstrations to insist that the will of the voters in the primaries and caucuses be respected. I think it's going to be an exciting time. I know you'll be there. So let's talk about this general election. I am unconcerned about polls that show, at this point, virtually any Republican candidate running behind Hillary Clinton. For the life of me, I don't know why Bernie Sanders doesn't attack Hillary on the issues where she is most vulnerable. All he attacks her on are, all he talks about endlessly about is Wall Street. And she merely imitates everything he says while taking multi-million-dollar payoffs from Wall Street. And sadly, Democratic primary voters are cowed. They're fooled. She's winning on the backs of African American votes, which is outrageous because the reason so many young African American men are in jail today is because of the policies of Bill Clinton. The only place Hillary Clinton wants to feed poor black people is in a prison cafeteria. The Clintons are famous for race baiting. What was it Bill Clinton said to Ted Kennedy when Hillary and Barack Obama ran against each other? He said, a couple of years ago, this boy would be fetching our coffee. Bill Clinton, yes. So he plays a saxophone on Arsenio Hall, but his policies have not benefited African Americans in this country. And Hillary Clinton's had her own series of dog whistles. What did she mean when she ran against Obama and said black people need to be made to heal? What does that mean? That's offensive. We're in the party of civil rights. This is the party of civil rights. This is the party of Lincoln. We may have lost our way, but we should return to that path. So, it is extraordinary to me that on the biggest three issues in which Hillary is incredibly vulnerable, Bernie Sanders never raises them. We'll get there. You made reference to the war on women. This is, I think, the linchpin to defeating Hillary. Hillary Clinton is not an advocate for women or girls. She is an abuser of women and girls. The sad truth is, Bill Clinton is a Bill Cosby-type sexual predator. Now let me be very clear. I'm not talking about marital infidelity. I'm not talking about girlfriends. I'm not talking about mistresses. I'm not talking about conquests. I'm not talking about one-night stands. That's what the media would like this to be about. Oh, that's within their marriage. That's no one's business. No, I'm talking about something far darker. Rape, sexual assault, I interviewed no fewer than 24 women who've been sexually assaulted by Bill. And it's amazing because in many cases, these women don't know each other, have never spoken to each other, have never communicated. But they all tell the same story about how his face turns beet red, how the veins on the side of his neck his head, stand out. They all describe his man parts identically. And of course, you know his MO. He bites the upper lip of his victim. He bites it almost through. It's a classic disabling move for rapists. Who reported this? Roger Stone? No. NBC, The Washington Post, and the LA Times. They all reported it. Bill Clinton is a sexual predator, and the only difference between he and Bill Cosby is Cosby drugged his victims. Bill physically overpowers his victims. If Jesse Jackson were here right now, he would say, the black man is arraigned, but the white man campaigns. There is racism in the fact that the media will not go there. Now, you know some of the names of these women. Kathleen Willey, who I'm proud to say wrote the introduction in my book. Juanita Broaddrick, who was raped in 1978 by Bill Clinton while he was running for Attorney General. Paula Corbin Jones, who got an $850,000 settlement for her lawsuit against Bill Clinton. So when people say, oh, they've never been found guilty, well, I'll use Hillary's own words. These women deserve to be believed. And if there were 2 or 3 of them, you might say, well, perhaps they're looking for a payoff. Perhaps they're looking for their 15 minutes. Perhaps they're not telling the truth. But when the numbers are overwhelming, Liz Ward Grayson, Eileen Wellstone, Becky Brown, Helen Dowdy, Dorothy Kyle Browning, this list goes on and on and on. It is an epic tale of abuse. Now, Chris Christie and Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio all said that Bill's sexual history is irrelevant to this campaign. I'll tell you why it isn't. It's not irrelevant because in every case, Hillary Clinton is an accessory after the fact in these crimes because it's Hillary who directs the effort to bully, intimidate, and pressure these women out of testifying or out of going public. Sometimes she does it face-to-face herself. When Juanita Broaddrick, who met Bill Clinton at a state conference, was invited to his room ostensibly to talk about his state job, was assaulted and bit by Bill, and again, he bit her upper lip so severely that he almost bit it through. It turned black. And then he raped her a second time. When she told her horrific tale to NBC, which you can go to YouTube and see tonight, and she began to talk about not only her ordeal with Bill, but the fact that days later at a state conference, Hillary, face-to-face, saw her out and tried to intimidate her. A producer from NBC jumped up and said, cut, we don't want to talk about that. So the media is a handmaiden. They are complicit in the cover-up of these crimes. They don't like the narrative. Last night, my friend Steve Malzberg from Newsmax was on CNN, and he began to talk about Hillary's legal defense of a rapist in her short legal career, in which she is caught on tape laughing about the fact that he was guilty and that she got him off, and they cut him off. They unplugged him. The media doesn't want to hear the truth. They're not going to report the truth. Hillary's greatest vulnerability is her abuse of women. As far as her being an advocate for children, it was Hillary Clinton who gave the order for the assault in Waco, in which 18 children under the age of 8 were killed in a firefight, because Hillary Clinton chose our Attorney General, Janet Reno. Hillary Clinton chose the Deputy Attorney General, Webster Hubbell. More about him later. And both the House Committee investigating Waco and their chief investigator, T. March Bell, and Senator Arlen Specter, who chaired the Senate committees looking into Waco, confirmed the order was given by co-president Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton selected Bill Clinton's cabinet. She wrote Hillary Care, which was the forerunner to Obamacare. She was demanding the office next to the Oval Office that normally goes to the vice president. She was your co-president. And she is the one responsible for the death of innocent children in Waco. When she had the opportunity to declare Boko Haram a terrorist group, she refused. I think most of you know, they kidnapped and made sex slaves out of 200 underage girls. Some advocate for children. So, Hillary Clinton is, as I say, an accessory after the fact in these crimes. Now, I believe that many of these women that I have gotten to know and respect, because they have all been pressured, they have all been intimidated, they have all been bullied, I think these women are going to speak out this fall. Let's take the example of Kathleen Willey. Kathleen Willey was an active Virginia Democrat, and she was active in both of Bill's campaigns. And when her family fell on hard times, she made an appointment with the President of the United States to ask for a paying job. She was working in the White House social office as a volunteer. And what she got for her trouble was groped, assaulted in the Oval Office. Bill Clinton tried to get his hand inside her bra and inside her pants. She fled, and for 2 years she said nothing, mainly because she didn't think anyone would believe her. And then when she got a subpoena in the Paula Jones case, that's when her trouble started. First it started with the late night phone calls saying, "We know where your children go to school." Her home was repeatedly broken in and ransacked. Her tires were slashed. Her pet cat, Thunderbolt, was murdered and left on her front step. Her other cat simply disappeared. A strange man showed up at the kennel where she kept her dog and said he was a friend of hers and tried to pick up the dog. They wouldn't release the dog. Her car windshield was smashed and a skull was put in the front seat. And then finally, when she was out jogging in a rural area, a man dressed all in black ran up to her and said, "Hey, how's your cat? Did you ever get a new cat? By the way, I saw your kids get out of school yesterday. You're not getting it, are you?" That man was Jack Palladino, private detective from Los Angeles. Several years later, Palladino was in a bar in LA, saw a beautiful woman, started chatting her up and bragging about his role. "I saved Hillary's ass," he said. "My only complaint is she didn't pay me more and didn't pay me on time." He didn't know the woman he was talking to was a reporter. It was Hillary Clinton who hires the heavy-handed private detectives, Jack Palladino, Anthony Pellicano, Ivan Duda, and the biggest scumbag of them all, Terry Lenzler. First to discredit Bill's victims, dig up dirt on them. Whores, bitches, floozies, trash, who's going to believe them? And then the intimidation tactics. Now, some of you may know the story of Jennifer Flowers. Jennifer Flowers was Bill Clinton's consensual mistress for 12 years. And this became public before the 1992 Democratic primary in New Hampshire. It was a very epic moment in politics. Bill and Hillary, in order to salvage his campaign, agreed to do an interview with 60 Minutes. Don Hewitt, the producer, says in his biography that he edited it to make it as sympathetic as possible. He said it was virtually a Clinton campaign commercial. He took credit for Bill Clinton's election. He's supposed to be a journalist. That's not his job. He just disgraced himself. He's no longer with us. But there was a man named Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson lived across the hall from Jennifer Flowers. And in the 60 Minutes interview, Bill Clinton said he'd only been with Jennifer one time, and it had been a mistake and caused pain in his marriage. One time in 12 years? That wasn't true. The problem was that Gary Johnson, who was an attorney, had set up a video camera, a security camera in the hallway because his car was being vandalized. And he thought it was someone in the apartment complex. Unfortunately for him, what he caught on tape was Bill Clinton coming and going with his own key many times. One night, 3 Arkansas state troopers showed up at his apartment, and they beat him so badly they left him for dead. They dislocated both of his shoulders, both of his elbows. They lacerated his spleen, his kidney, and his lungs, and they crushed his nasal passages. One neighbor said you could hear men yelling at the top of their lungs, "Where's the fucking tape? Where is the tape?" These are the tactics of the Clintons. This is what they're prepared to do in their insatiable quest for power and money. Then there is the question of Hillary's tenure as Secretary of State. She's proud of this. It's a disaster. Why? I'll tell you why. Because her right-hand woman, Huma Abedin, is a Muslim Brotherhood spy. Her college education was paid for by the Muslim Brotherhood. She was the editor of a college journal funded by the Muslim Brotherhood. Her parents and her brothers are active in the Muslim Brotherhood. Her mother is the #1 advocate for genital mutilation in the Islamic world. How did this woman get a national security clearance? We know that she is the person who went through the emails to decide what we can see and what we can't see, which means she has seen top secret U.S. documents. And the fact that Hillary chose to use a private homebrew server means the Chinese and the Russians have seen them too. Huma Abedin is also the only person in the history of the U.S. government who got a special waiver allowing her to get a full-time salary at the State Department while pulling down a full-time salary at the Clinton Foundation, while also working for Teneo, a Clinton-connected lobbying firm, which had a stink that was so bad that even Bill Clinton was forced to withdraw. Now, interestingly, that lobby firm, Teneo, represented a bunch of Middle Eastern governments in front of the State Department. An obvious, inherent conflict. Today, there's a story out in which Huma Abedin talks about the first time she met Hillary, and it was love at first sight. Now, is Hillary a lesbian? I don't say that in my book. Bill Clinton says it. He told Jennifer Flowers, and she writes in her book, I'll clean this up because we're in mixed company, Hillary's been with more women than I have. So this is a dysfunctional marriage. We'll come back to it. Why did they have a private server? Why did they destroy all these emails? I'll tell you why. Because they show the nexus between the State Department and the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative. Because you see, when Hillary was the Secretary of State, everything was for sale. So if you needed approval for a weapons purchase, if you were an arms dealer, you had to grease the Clinton Foundation. Or if you had a big defense contract on Hillary's desk for approval, you had to grease the Clinton Foundation. Or if you were seeking a major foreign policy change, like the deposing of Muammar Gaddafi, well, Shell Oil and the nation of Qatar paid for that, millions to Bill and Hillary personally, as well as to their phony foundation. The Clinton Foundation is not a charity. It's a slush fund for grifters. It's a vehicle for the facilitation of multi-million-dollar bribes. The Clintons are not liberals. They are not progressives. They are crony capitalists. They are about the money. You can't buy Hillary, but you sure as hell can rent her. The Clinton Foundation is probably the largest money laundering scheme in U.S. history. It's a $3 billion global fraud. It is a luxury travel service for Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton. Now, don't feel sorry for Chelsea, because she's a co-conspirator. She's worth about $40 million. She said recently in an interview, I tried to care about money, but I just couldn't. Well, if I lived in a $10.5 million apartment in Manhattan, I probably wouldn't care about money either. If my wedding cost $3.5 million, I wouldn't care about money either. How many people could you feed for $3.5 million? The cost of flowers and alcohol alone was $500,000. Her wedding dress, $125,000 for a dress. No, they don't care about money. Now, I think those are the three areas of vulnerability. Hillary's greatest stain is Libya. Now, Muammar Gaddafi was not a great guy, but he had renounced his nuclear ambitions. He was sharing all of his intelligence on Al-Qaeda with the U.S. He had looked at the larger picture and realized he was on the wrong side. So he had made peace with the West. The only reason he was removed is because we went to the national credit card and borrowed $800 million for massive bombing that displaced him. Now, under Gaddafi, women were allowed to own property. Women were allowed to be educated. Women were allowed to choose their own husbands. Women were allowed to go to college. Women were allowed to drive a car. Women were allowed to choose their own husbands. Women who were raped had their rapists prosecuted. Today, all those things are illegal in Hillary Clinton's Syria. She has set women in Libya. She has set women in Libya back 200 years. She's the advocate for women. We'll touch on Benghazi, because we must. You'll read in my book that the fiction that the attack on our mission in Benghazi was caused by the one-time showing of an anti-Islamic video in Turkey. That lie came from Sidney Blumenthal, who was a hatchet man for the Clintons. Sidney Blumenthal is so vile, so evil, so nasty, that even Barack Obama refused to let him have a job anywhere in his administration, and specifically prohibited Hillary from hiring him at the State Department. So Sidney was on the payroll of the Clinton Foundation, the charity, although why they need a political hitman, I don't know. I've certainly never been hired by any charities. And he wrote her a memo saying, here's an excuse for the attack. Now, we know for a fact that at the highest levels of U.S. intelligence, Hillary was told that wasn't true. Yet she repeated this lie to the parents of the 4 valiant Americans who were killed in Benghazi. The truth is not in this woman. She lies about being broke when she left the White House. She lies about the disappearing Whitewater billing records. She lies about her grandparents being immigrants. She lies about being named after Sir Edmund Hillary. She lies about being under sniper fire in Bosnia. She lies when it would be easier to tell the truth. Nothing she says is the truth. So I am convinced that the Clintons can only be beaten by raising these various issues. If you're going to be like John McCain and campaign up and down the country talking about what a great American and a great senator Barack Obama is, you're not going to beat them. These people are evil. They are very well situated with the media. Very recently, I was in the green room at Fox with a very prominent woman attorney. This is a woman attorney who all of you know, a woman attorney who represents women who've been assaulted or discriminated against and so on. You can guess her name. And I had a civil conversation with her, and I said, I'm perplexed about your support for the Clintons. I don't understand how you can possibly support Hillary Clinton knowing what Bill and Hillary have done to individual women, and knowing how Hillary has abused Bill's sexual assault victims, because Bill assaults them physically, and then Hillary assaults them psychologically. And she said, well, I support them because Bill and Hillary are pro-choice. So the agenda of the left is more important than the violation, the physical violation of individual women. That's what we're dealing with. And that is the mindset of so many in the media. Now, there are two dark secrets about the Clintons that are in this book, and I wanted to address them, and then I'll take your questions. Hillary says Black Lives Matter, but they only matter if you're not Danny Williams, because Danny Williams is the African-American son of Bill Clinton, the rejected, abandoned son of Bill Clinton. He's 30 years old today. He is the son of Bill Clinton and Bobby Ann Williams. Bobby Ann Williams was a cocaine-addicted prostitute, currently in prison. Bobby Ann Williams is certain that Bill is Danny's father because Bill was the only white client she had in the year prior to Danny's birth. Danny Williams, 30 years old today, has 5 children of his own. Now, in 1990, well, I would say two things. At the time this story surfaced, Danny's mother and his aunt took him to the governor's mansion to see Hillary Clinton to demand that the Clintons acknowledge and support their son. And instead, Hillary basically said that if they continued to bother her, she would turn the state police on them. They banished Danny Williams. But the state trooper, L.D. Brown, who was Bill's bodyguard and driver, said that the governor directed him to deliver Christmas presents to the little shack where Danny and his mother lived for 7 years running. So Bill Clinton knows who Danny's father is. By the way, his mother passed a lie detector test. Now, in 1999, when Hillary was warming up for her U.S. Senate race in New York, the Star tabloid published a story that said that a DNA test proved definitively that Bill Clinton was not Danny Williams' father. Then the Washington Post took that and wrote it as a fact. Howard Kurtz, now with Fox News. Never having seen a DNA test, he just wrote it. Then Time Magazine picked it up from there, and Associated Press picked it up from there, and this is how factoids are born. Here's what Mr. Kurtz did not tell you. The Star magazine in 1999 was owned by Robert Altman, Georgetown classmate of Bill Clinton, Deputy Secretary of the Treasury in the Clinton administration, a man forced to resign for ethical reasons because he was tipping the Clintons off about the Whitewater investigation. Robert Altman has given over $750,000 to the various political endeavors of the Clintons. Now, Mr. Altman sold the Star a number of years ago to American Media, which is just up the street here in West Palm Beach. They were very gracious in opening their files for me. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no DNA test. There never was a DNA test. Bill Clinton is Danny Williams' father. And they abandoned this young man like a piece of garbage because he got in the way of their quest for power and wealth. So Bill Clinton is not only a deadbeat dad, he's a deadbeat granddad because Danny Williams has 5 children of his own. And he works 2 jobs today to try to make ends meet. His wealthy, famous father is worth upwards of $150 million. Black Lives Matter unless you're the abandoned, rejected son of Bill Clinton. Danny Williams has never been acknowledged. He's never been supported. He's never been nurtured. He's never been loved because the Clintons refused to step up to their responsibility. And when you raise this question with the Clintonites, they'll say, oh, no, that was all disproved in 1999. No, none of it was disproved. The DNA test is a lie. Howard Kurtz from Fox owes us an apology, a public written apology. Don't hold your breath. Black voters need to know about Danny Williams. Danny's not seeking money. I interviewed him. You know what he said? I want to shake my father's hand before he dies. I want him to see his grandchildren before he dies. I just want to know who my father is. And then there's the other dark secret, which I have to touch on. Bill Clinton is not Chelsea Clinton's father. Chelsea Clinton's father is Webster Hubbell. If you look in the book, you'll see numerous pictures comparing them. How do we know this? Well, L.D. Brown, once again, Bill Clinton's driver and bodyguard, says that Bill told him that he learned that Hillary was pregnant by reading it in the newspaper. And when Chelsea was born, there was no public announcement or no photograph. She's had multiple plastic surgeries as early as age 22, but you can't hide the truth. She looks just like her father. Several months ago, when she was in Austin, Texas for a book signing for her book, which I guarantee you she didn't write, she was asked point blank by my co-author, Robert Morrow, has your mother ever told you that Webster Hubbell is your father? And without missing a beat, she looked up, not even missing a breath, and said, I'm proud to be the daughter of my parents. And Webster Hubbell reached in his office 3 days later, asked by WorldNet Daily, are you the father of Chelsea Clinton? He said, and I quote, get this down, no comment, and he hung up. Now, I've been in politics almost 40 years. When somebody tells a lie, you say, that's a lie. Neither one of them deny this, and I'll tell you why. Because they suspect that somebody has a DNA sample for both of them. And her parentage can be proved. Now, why is this important? I'm not trying to pick on a child or a little girl. She, by the way, is very much like her mother, according to a profile in the New York Post. Foul-mouthed, greedy, pushy, abrasive, abusive, and demanding. They can't keep a staff because she abuses the people who work for her. She and her husband, Mark Mezvinsky, the son of the convicted Ponzi scam Congressman Ed Mezvinsky, are just as greedy, just as vile, just as entitled as Bill and Hillary. So please don't feel sorry for Hillary or Chelsea. The point of this is the dysfunctional nature of this marriage. It's a fraud. Don't choose Hillary. Do what Bill did. Choose someone else. With that, I'd be happy to take your question. Well, let me finish this up. So I have to sum this up. Bill and Hillary Clinton are the penicillin-resistant syphilis of the American body politic. I'm happy to take any of your questions. Yes, you have.
Well, I actually had a comment.
Yes.
Hillary has actually on a very major issue, and I noted this because I'm a proud member of the National Rifle Association. She actually has proven herself, believe it or not, on gun rights, far even left of Sanders, because a while in the Democratic debate a couple weeks ago, when she was saying that we need to hold gun owners, gun manufacturers responsible when somebody goes out and shoots up a school with one of their guns after they pass a background check and everything, because they haven't done anything till then. That they should be able to go and sue the people who made the gun now. Sanders actually came out, and believe it or not, he was praised by the National Rifle Association for this. He made such a deal out of it. That now, of course, they did reaffirm that they do not support him in the slightest, but they just liked what he said on this. He called Hillary Clinton out, because I know you said he doesn't do that very often. He called her out and he said, what you're talking about is not stopping, crony gun manufacturers. What you're talking about is ending gun manufacturing in America.
Yes.
And that is not something I can stand for.
Well, he's from Vermont.
Yeah.
A lot of gun owners in Vermont.
Yeah.
Just recall, Bernie Sanders has been on the Veterans Affairs Committee as the ranking member for 30 years. 30 years. 128 veterans died last year waiting for medical care. The government sought to cover that up, and to this day, no one has been held responsible. The two senators who are ranking on that committee, John McCain and Bernie Sanders. Shame on you. Shame on both of you. They've done nothing for the American veterans. Nothing. They both disgraced their country. Yes.
Okay, I have a couple of things.
Sure.
First off, I've got a great idea for your next book.
Okay.
The trail of dead bodies they've left behind.
Yes, I do address this in this book.
Oh, you,
Now, in all fairness, you can go online, and there are some authors, some researchers, who attribute 83 individual deaths to the Clintons. That's completely unfair. I can only track down 63 of them. I must tell you, I am not certain that Vince Foster was murdered. I am certain that Hillary ordered his body moved so that his office, where he did, I think, commit suicide, driven to it by Hillary, who humiliated him in front of an entire White House staff meeting just 2 days prior. She didn't want his office to become a crime scene, and she didn't want her most delicate legal documents pertaining to Whitewater and other matters to be in the hands of federal investigators. That's why she had the body moved to Fort Marcy Park. How do we know the body was moved? He's found 30 yards down a muddy trail, and it had rained only 2 hours previously. There's no mud, not even dirt on his feet, on his shoes, none. It's in the FBI report. There are carpet fibers all over his suit. Why? Because they rolled him in a carpet to take him out of the old executive office building. I named the men who did this in the book. I'm still waiting, the men who moved the body. I'm still waiting for the lawsuit. It will never come.
the other part of this is with the Panama Papers out,
Yes.
and there's a lot of names in there that
Yes.
haven't even come out yet. They've got to be in there.
Well, they're very adept at money laundering. There's no question about that. That story is an enormous story. I've been traveling. I've only been able to see bits and pieces of it. But yes, I think the globalists, the global elite, are very entwined in that scandal. Yes, sir.
We haven't seen the Americans in that list, so we haven't.
We haven't seen them yet.
I have a kind of related question to that. Can you speak to the Yamina airfield in Arkansas, the two dead boys that were found on the tracks near there?
Yes.
And also the 4 grand jury witnesses that I think I counted in your book.
Yes.
That ended up in mysterious murders.
Yes.
That were witnessing to the drug operations that were going on.
Yes. What he refers to is the fact that when the U.S. Congress cut off funding for the Nicaraguan Contras under Ronald Reagan, Vice President George Bush headed a secret interagency task force which trafficked millions of dollars worth of cocaine into the United States, which was sold in our urban centers to convert the money to cash for funding of the forces in Nicaragua. They first tried to do this in Texas, but because it was a highly illegal operation, the governor of Texas and the Texas Rangers refused to look the other way. Then they tried to do it in Louisiana, and it didn't work there either. Finally, they found a friendly governor willing to take his cut. That was William Jefferson Clinton. And they trafficked millions of dollars into Mena, Arkansas. Dan Lassiter, who was Clinton's partner, was essentially taking Bill Clinton's piece. When he ultimately got convicted of drug crimes, he hired 2 really sharp lawyers, Hillary Clinton and Vince Foster. And guess what? Governor Bill Clinton gave him a full pardon. Amazing. So you also refer to the fact that there were 2 young men who either witnessed a drug drop or may have actually picked up a drug drop. They were found dead on a railroad track. The coroner who reported to the governor, the state coroner, said that they had smoked marijuana, fallen asleep on the tracks, and were killed by a train. He failed to mention the bullets in the back of their heads. At least 4 other children who learned about this from the first 2 boys would die mysteriously. Now, the story of Mina can be found extensively in this book as well. This book originally was called Jeb and the Bush Crime Family, Jeb exclamation point. Now I realize it should have been Jeb question mark. Maybe it should be just Jeb period. Actually, in paperback, this will be called The Bush Crime Family. Jeb is not a conservative. Jeb is not a businessman. When Jeb moved the management of the state pension fund to Lehman Brothers, Lehman Brothers loaded up on toxic mortgage-based securities. You and I, my friends, Florida taxpayers, we lost $1 billion. The week Jeb left as governor, he got a fat check from Lehman for $1.5 million to be a consultant. Obamacare, Jeb made millions on Obamacare through Tenet Healthcare. Obama phones, Jeb and Carlos Slim are the partners in TracFone that have the federal contract from the Obama administration. Don't buy the act. Just like the Clintons are not liberals or progressives, the Bushes are not conservatives. They are all crony capitalists, which is why the joint Clinton-Bush Haiti Relief Fund is a scam. They raised $138 million. They spent $9 million in Haiti, and the other $128 has disappeared into the pockets of the 2 families. This is why Barbara Bush says that Bill Clinton is like her 5th son. And this is why George W. Bush says that Bill is like his brother. That makes Hillary his sister-in-law. This is enough to make you puke. These people are criminals. Yes?
Do you feel comfortable in giving us your thoughts about Donald Trump, whatever they may be?
He's not by any means the perfect candidate. I don't argue that he's a pure conservative. He's not. He's a populist conservative. But I do argue that in this race, he's the only nationalist. Everybody else he's running against is a globalist. He is also the only one who believes in American sovereignty. By the way, if you have a little time, be sure to get the paper that Heidi Cruz wrote advocating the North American Accord. That's where we would take the Canadian, U.S., and Mexican government and combine them into one government.
They were CFR members.
From the beginning.
Right.
Ted Cruz became a conservative exactly 4 years ago.
Exactly.
George W. Bush's top issue advisor when he ran for president, Ted Cruz. George W. Bush's chief issue advisor the first year of his presidency, Ted Cruz, who supports TPP. Now, what they don't tell you is that Heidi Cruz, who I'm sure is a very nice lady, she was Condoleezza Rice's deputy at the NSC when they lied us into the Iraq War. She then went over to the U.S. Trade Representative's office and was the deputy for Robert Zoellick. Robert Zoellick is a neocon warlord. This guy is an international criminal. When he went to Goldman Sachs, she went to Goldman Sachs, which is why Goldman gave Ted Cruz a secret, sweetheart, $1 million loan for his Senate race. Now, he tells a heartfelt story about Heidi cashing in her retirement to fund his Senate race. It's a lie. He is a liar. This is why Trump calls him Lying Ted Cruz. Last night on Megyn Kelly, he said that I planted the story about his zipper problem with the National Enquirer. That, too, is a lie, because that story was shopped by the Marco Rubio people. But Ted, prove it. Prove I planted that story. He says, well, you're quoted in it. Absolutely right. If I were going to plant a story as a dirty trick, would I be quoted in it? Would I leave a thumbprint? Ted is a fraud. not a conservative, not a constitutionalist, a globalist. His wife's a charter member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Thanks for exposure.
Yes.
How you doing, sir? First, I want to thank you for coming. So you've been around a long time, so I'm sure you know a lot about certain big issues that happen in this country. Number one is insider trading on 9/11.
Yes.
Do you know anything about that? And Silverstein making $3 billion in insurance claims?
Yes,
And,
there are so many questions about 9/11 that trouble me. I have not written a book on it.
And
I
can you
have
talk
not-
about George Bush a little bit? W.
We know several things. Donald Trump was exactly right in the debate when he said, we had multiple warnings about 9/11 and we did nothing. The CIA, George Tenet knew, Condoleezza Rice knew, we had multiple warnings, we did nothing. More specifically, as I think most of you know, several of the hijackers trained right here in Florida. Jeb Bush had no less than 22 warnings and complaints from neighbors that something wasn't right, that something was going on. And what did his state police do? They did nothing. That's why he dropped out. Because had he continued, Trump would hit him with that next. That's why he folded. Good riddance. Another question. Yes, sir.
I have two questions for you.
Yes.
One is, can we get Monica Lewinsky's dress into a DNA sample for Floyd?
Unfortunately, the government's not going to turn that over. But what's interesting is, in the phony Star magazine store, they actually claimed that that's where they got Bill's sample. And some men, Danny told me, did show up to take a swab inside his mouth. Now, when I checked with the Office of the Special Prosecutor of the Records, they never turned over any sample to the Star magazine, to a tabloid. That would never happen. But Bill Clinton's father is not Billy Blythe, as he says in his biography. Bill's father is Dr. George Wright, because Bill's mother was an alley cat. And Dr. Wright has 3 sons of his own. Consequently, if the DNA of any of Dr. Wright's son matches that of Danny Williams, it proves that Bill is Danny's father. Is that outlandish? No, that's the exact technology that was used to prove that Thomas Jefferson fathered a child with the black slave Sally Hemings, because of course Jefferson's DNA is unavailable to us today. And I think that may be done.
My second question
Go.
to you is, there was something a couple of weeks back about the Clinton Foundation getting money from Canada, all the Middle Eastern.
Yes.
Could you explain that a little
Yes.
bit?
The Clinton Foundation book, Clinton Cash, by Peter Schweitzer, is a great book, terrific book. And I cite it extensively in my book. But at this point, it's an outdated book, meaning that the Clinton Foundation has made numerous filings in the states and federally that are completely permeated with fraud. And they've now moved to the next phase, which is opening branches of the Clinton Foundation in countries that have no laws governing transparency or reporting. So if you want to launder a couple million to the Clintons, you send it to the Clinton Foundation branch in Canada. And that is what has happened. By the way, just to make sure that you understand this is bipartisan, the Saudis just gave $10 million to the McCain Foundation. John McCain is opposed to releasing the 29 pages of the 9/11 Commission report, which our own Senator Bob Graham tells us prove Saudi royal family financing of the attack on America. Shame on you, John McCain. Yes.
Again, very interesting presentation. I want to go back a little bit to the Republican side.
Yes.
First of all, you talked about obviously the Clintons being dysfunctional. Obviously, right now, the Republican race, you could also say is somewhat dysfunctional right now in terms
Yes.
of who's going to support who.
Yes.
After that, the really question is, do you believe the Republicans are going to be able to come together after the convention in order to beat the Clinton, Hillary Clinton? And if so, who do you think is the best person to take that forward? Is it going to be Trump or would it be Cruz?
Well,
Or do you think it's someone else?
First of all, I think Trump will be nominated on the first ballot, or someone someone who did not run for president will be nominated on the fourth. The establishment doesn't like Ted Cruz, not for ideological reasons. He's one of them, but he has no friends. He's a very prickly personality. To put it quite bluntly, he's a total asshole. So they will drop him like a hot potato. They're using him right now to block Trump, but that's not where they want to go. They prefer a John Kasich. They prefer a Paul Ryan. I think that there will be a revolt in the party if there's an attempt to nominate someone who didn't have the courage to go out and run. Look, I respect John Kasich. I don't agree with him, but at least he had the courage to run. If you want to be president, run. The credit, as Teddy Roosevelt said, belonged to the man who gets in the arena, not the man who stands on the sideline and points out how the man in the arena could have done better. So, to answer the second part of your question, the only way to beat Hillary is to fearlessly raise her abuse of women. If you're afraid to do that, you cannot beat her. If you buy her narrative that she's been an advocate for women, you will not beat her. If you don't take apart her ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and her failures as Secretary of State, if you don't expose the hoax that is the Clinton Foundation, you can't beat her. Now, Donald Trump donated $100,000 to the Clinton Foundation. He thought he was giving to a charity. He didn't know they were going to steal the money. But that means he has standing right now to bring a lawsuit for fraud and open the whole thing up for us. Watch for that this fall. Yes.
Why are the Republicans, he's the only one who's going to give her a hard time? Why are they so against him?
Because they are globalists, she is a globalist. Because many of our leaders in the party wear the second hat of lobbyists. So if you have a Republican Senate and a Republican House, but a Democratic president, they know Hillary's transactional. They know you can't buy her, but you can rent her. They know if you have special interest campaign contributions, that she is accessible. This is about their livelihood. Very sadly, there are some in the Republican Party who would rather have Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump. I'll tell you why. Trump can't be controlled. He doesn't need their money. He's not beholden to anybody. You can't bully him. He's tough as nails. So he doesn't belong to anybody. He can't be influenced. You would have, for the first time, somebody who could actually cut federal spending. Somebody who would actually secure our borders. Somebody who would actually get rid of these international globalist trade deals like NAFTA and TPP and make deals that are in the best interests of the United States. It scares the crap out of the Republican establishment. That's why they're fighting. Yes.
Stop the steal.
Yes.
Yes. So I am so frustrated. I go online and I post it about 100 times a day, and it needs to get out. And what's really going on with Stop the Steal?
Several things. It's very hard to have a convention strategy until you have a hard count of the delegates. You can't have a hard count of the delegates because we still have a little less than a third of the delegates yet to be selected. And we don't know the outcome in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, New Mexico, and so on. So until that process plays out, you don't know where you really are. Once that is done, the Trump campaign has to have the skill to have a hard delegate count. They also need to have a realistic count on where they stand on procedural issues. So if we are challenged in rules or credentials, you know how many votes you have. When you know how many votes you have, now you know how many votes you need. So if you are theoretically, if Donald Trump gets to 1,100, I can think of 5 places to go get the other 100 votes. The easiest one is to find somebody who wants to be vice president and takes 100 votes with them. That's one option. It doesn't have to be somebody who ran for president. It could be some governor, some U.S. senator, or some combination thereof. So I still think that if you're closest to the nomination and your nearest competitor is 250 to 300 votes behind you, you're still in the driver's seat to do what Donald Trump does best, make a deal. Now, I also think that in the states where Ted Cruz has won, specifically, Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, you've had widespread voter fraud. And that's being documented by our project, Stop the Steal. We are using volunteers and experts in election law, local attorneys. We're documenting it. We're getting sworn affidavits. We have over 700 of them in Oklahoma. We have now over 2,000 in Texas. People who say, I voted for Donald Trump, I saw my vote totaled for Ted Cruz. And therefore, conceivably, just as a strategic option, Trump supporters or the Trump campaign would have the ability to challenge the seating of those delegates in the Credentials Committee, depending on the overall vote situation. So Trump is not without strategic options. I'm working with a group called Stop the Steal. You can go to stopthesteal.org. Please send us a few dollars because we got to still pay for the airfares for these lawyers. But every time there's a new caucus, we get more complaints. By the way, the #1 state for fraud, Utah. Massive fraud. Thousands of fraudulent votes cast for Ted
Soros
Cruz.
was the man behind it, right?
Well, we know this. These demonstrators who are coming to disrupt the Trump rallies, who are wearing the Bernie t-shirts, they have nothing to do with Bernie. Bernie is being used. These are paid for and organized by George Soros and his twisted little sideman, David Brock, and funded by other left-wing millionaires, billionaires in Chicago with the assistance of the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, a Clinton supporter. Blaming Bernie is like blaming the communists for the Reichstag fire. It's a fraud on Bernie. He has nothing to do with it. Yes?
Thank you. Can we talk about Kasich for a minute and him balancing the budget that he gives himself credit for? What I remember is Ross Perot talking to us and showing us all of his charts, the way they used accounting accruals, that once Bill got out of office after that first year, our indebtedness would skyrocket, and that's exactly what happened. Is there any discussion, any knowledge on that? Is that being considered?
I have read about that. John Kasich is also obviously a supporter of Common Core. He expended Medicare. He voted in the Congress for NAFTA. He's a globalist. He's an insider. He talks about being
But
anti-establishment.
the budget really was not balanced.
No, that's correct. And the debt in Ohio skyrocketed, as I recall. I think you have a $22 billion debt there now. I think that's.
But I'm speaking nationally, when he and Clinton were together.
Yes, they talked about a balanced budget at that time,
It was
yes.
not balanced because of using accruals.
Also.
And moving expenses.
Also, interestingly enough, in the federal bank accounts right now, there's $1 trillion that is unbudgeted for, that has not been swept by this administration. Every president previously has swept the accounts and used the money for the operations of government. So before you talk about cutting Medicaid or Social Security, there's $1 trillion sitting there, which Senator Coburn, the former senator from Oklahoma, has written extensively about, and which Donald Trump has talked about. Trump's economic plan is very dynamic. It would cut our corporate tax rate below that of China. That brings all those companies doing business in China, because it's more profitable, home. So those companies would expand here, hire here, create jobs here. He also has an aggressive plan to bring back $2 trillion that's sitting offshore untaxed. And it provides an across-the-board tax cut. It's the most growth-oriented tax proposal of any candidate. That's why the Club for Growth keeps attacking him. Don't get it.
Roger, one other.
Go ahead.
Does Trump have any way of winning,
Yes, he can win.
even with all the machine that's behind it?
Yes, he can win.
Okay.
It remains to be seen whether he does, but
That's correct.
he can win. And you have to admit, on what is basically a solely communications-based strategy. So recognize he has spent nothing whatsoever on polling, nothing on targeting, nothing on analytics, virtually nothing on paid television, virtually nothing on paid radio, no voter mailings, no phone calls. His whole model is these massive rallies to get huge press coverage, plus the debates, plus every interview he can possibly do. It's been a brilliant strategy. It's a strategy that personally I thought would not work, and I said so. And I've been wrong. However, now we're in a different phase of the campaign. A phase where knowledge of the rules and convention organization, I'll get to you, I promise. Where convention rules and knowledge of the process and knowledge of the players matter. This is the most difficult phase of the campaign. Watch Colorado, watch Wyoming, watch Arizona, watch Connecticut. They're going to try to rob him blind in every one of those. Yes?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm so sorry I'm late. First of all, I want to say I admire you.
Thank you.
My name is Soraya Foss. I drove all the way from Miami. And I'm actually a presidential candidate for the United States of America as an independent. I'm a registered Republican. And the reason why I went as an independent is because there's 600 people, if not more, who are running for president, and I knew I wasn't going to have a chance. Okay? And I can say that everything that you've written about and that you're saying today is true. And the only reason why I went into politics, because when I was 14 years old, talking about the Clintons and women, was because I was told by the head of the Democratic fundraising during the Clintons' son that I'd make a great politician's wife, but I can never be a politician because I'm a woman. And this is coming from the people that work for somebody who's trying to be the first woman president of the United States of America, Hillary Clinton. Okay? So that goes to show that there's so much that people don't know about. Okay? On a personal note, I can tell you that's how I feel about the Bushes. You're 100% on. I have met with a private investigator that has been investigating the 9/11 that was told, you're an old man that's crazy. Okay? Nobody will believe you. And if you say something, we will kill you.
Okay, thanks. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like to be my vice president? Let me tell you, I don't know if I've sent you messages.
Okay. It might interfere with my coming U.S. Senate campaign, so I don't.
I would love, and I know that you're helping, with Trump and things like that, which let me tell you, I think he's one of the strongest that we have right now. I tell everybody I am like Trump. I don't say things like Trump, but I am in the sense that I cannot be fake, okay, and I cannot be bought. And that's why everybody fears me. They all know about me. All of them know who I am. And I can tell you, right now, we're working on a reality documentary show to uncover the corruption behind the two-party system, to show the reason why there hasn't been an independent, okay, because the laws are totally different, and it's discriminating on everybody.
Thank you
So-
very much, but we have a lot of questions
Yes.
here.
I know, but I would just like to
Thank
know
you.
your input.
Let's talk
After.
about that vice presidential offer over a cocktail later.
Okay.
And thank you for coming. Yes, sir.
Hi, big fan. Just wanted to kind of bounce off the Kasich thing. I guess we found out now he's backed by Soros.
Yes.
Which is pretty funny.
Yeah, there's over $760,000 in Soros-connected money in his super PACs. His handler, John Weaver, is actually on the payroll of Soros. I really think the game plan here, just as George Bush was forced on the ticket with Ronald Reagan, so the insiders, I think that's the backup play. If in the end Trump succeeds, I think they hope to force Kasich on him as the price of party peace. I think that is the agenda. That's why George Soros is propping up his candidacy. Somebody who hasn't asked a question. You, sir.
Thank you. I'm a veteran, and you mentioned in your presentation, excellent, very, very interesting for me what you have. I don't have any of those private sources that you have. So mine is the public media, unfortunately. But you passed on Benghazi. You mentioned it briefly.
Yes.
I think there are 4 people that have been totally ignored since we've had hearings. We've had hearings in the Congress where we now control both houses.
Yes.
In my opinion, very little has changed from when the Democrats won. And they ran it. Very little has changed, and we better make ourselves known that we are different if we want to have the top office. Now, when Hillary Clinton whispered in the ears that I saw on TV to the widows, the truth would be made known to them directly from the White House. Not verbatim, I can give it to you, I wasn't there. But you know what I'm alluding to?
Yes.
I would like to know if you have any insight on this. Why, when we had her for at least 11 hours in front of Congress, nobody, not even guys like Trey Gowdy, who were not exactly soft on her, didn't bring this up. I heard nothing to an explanation of who answered those 3 or 4 documented phone calls for military help between 3 and 4 in the morning.
Yes. First of all, there's a huge difference if you read the entire transcript of the hearings and what you saw on TV. This was not a great tour de force by Hillary. She was forced to admit numerous lies. For example, she told her own daughter and the Egyptian ambassador within an hour that we'd been attacked by a terrorist group affiliated with Al-Qaeda. That she lied to the American people and to the parents of the 4 people. The short answer to your question is Valerie Jarrett, which is why Hillary will not be indicted. We have a Mexican standoff here. Here's what will happen. The FBI director has a tough job because the evidence is overwhelming. This does not require criminal intent. Criminal negligence is sufficient. She is guilty. He's going to recommend her indictment. She will be immediately pardoned by Barack Obama, and that will be the last of this. She's going to get a full, free, and unconditional pardon. When it happens, say you heard it here first, because that's what is going to happen. Before the Justice Department even has to deal with the question of her indictment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you very much for your great presentation. It seems like there are an increasing amount of op-ed pieces and articles coming out about how Trump is anti-women as
Yes.
well. Is there any basis for those stories?
Well, anti-women in what sense? I'll tell you this.
I'm just...
Women in the Trump organization are paid more than men. Hillary talks endlessly about pay inequality, but no place where she's been the boss, not the State Department, not the Clinton campaign, not the Clinton Foundation, not the U.S. Senate, have women ever been paid as much as men. She talks the talk, but she never walks the walk. Now, this whole narrative of Trump as misogynist is part and parcel of the mainstream media attempt to take down Donald Trump. And it is something he's going to have to address. I think he began addressing it tonight, or today, when his wife spoke in Wisconsin. His daughter, Ivanka, who is one of the most impressive women I have ever met, and I know her well, just a wonderful woman who balances motherhood with a career, with a husband. She manages to do it all and always look great. She's a real asset. She has just given birth to her third child. And I think as soon as she is back on her feet, she will be an enormous asset in terms of addressing these questions on behalf of her father.
She was on hand to be on the radio today. I heard her.
Yeah,
too.
she's starting to
Excellent.
do more stuff. I'm going to do one more question, and then it's time to sign some books. You, sir, all the way in the back.
Thank you. First of all, I have a book that you have to sign.
I'd be happy to.
Got it. And I want to know, does the mainstream media, when you go on television, for example, do they stop you from speaking like this?
Well, it's very interesting that you would bring this up today. Only hours ago, we learned that yesterday, when I gave an interview to Bloomberg Television, which was online, with Mark Halpern and John Heilman, normally that would show later in the day at MSNBC. MSNBC edited out the section in which I spoke. So I have now been banned by CNN and banned by MSNBC. According to Politico, a spokesperson for MSNBC said I have been banned. Is this the Soviet Union? I mean, I've had the 4 major television networks from Russia have interviewed me about this book for hours. There is more freedom of the press right now in Russia than there is in this country. This is disgraceful. Liberals love free speech as long as it's theirs and not yours. Fox has been very good to me, and no one at Fox has ever said to me, you can't go there, you can't discuss this, you can't discuss that.
I haven't heard
Never
you
happened.
talk like this on Fox either.
Well, they don't give you that much time, and also, they dictate the subject matter. So, I have certainly talked about this book and the Clintons' trail of crime and Hillary's abuse of women on Fox. Fox and Friends, I've discussed it. With Sean Hannity, I've discussed it. But when I've been on, the few times I've been on with Megyn Kelly, who in all honesty has always treated me fairly and allowed me to defend Trump, they still set the subject matter, and they also don't give you much time.
I just think we need your voice out there.
Well, I appreciate it.
He's on YouTube tremendously.
Well,
Alex
I'm
Jones,
out there.
Michael Savage.
I'm out there, that's for
It's
sure.
all good.
At this point, I thank you very much for your questions. If you want to ask me, John, how do you want to do this? Okay, fine. We will bring books up here. You can purchase books here, and then I will sign them over here.
Thank you. And come next week, next month, we're having.
Yes.
Oh, they stopped bringing it out when he was speaking. They'll bring it out now. Come next month we're having all the local candidates. See you then.